When the Second World War came to an end, the automotive world was left in ruins, just like the cities that had once built its greatest machines. Production lines that had once created elegant sedans and powerful engines were turned to tanks, aircraft parts, and military trucks. In the United States, however, a new era was waiting to begin, and no company symbolized that post-war rebirth more than the Ford Motor Company. The 1949 Ford Custom was not just a car, it was a declaration that America was back, that modernity had arrived, and that Ford had found its new soul after years of struggle and wartime service. By 1945, Ford faced a challenge unlike anything in its history. Its founder, Henry Ford, was aging and resistant to change, clinging to ideas that had made the company great in the early 20th century but that were now outdated. The company had fallen behind General Motors and Chrysler, both of which had started preparing new post-war designs even before the fighting had ended. The public, tired of wartime austerity, wanted something fresh, something that didn't look like a car from 1941 with new chrome trim. They wanted sleekness, modernity, and the sense of freedom that peace had promised. Ford's future depended on building exactly that. When Henry Ford II took control of the company in 1945, he inherited not just a business, but a crumbling empire. The old management methods were inefficient, the product line stale, and the morale low. Yet Henry Ford II, known as the Deuce, brought in new energy and a new generation of thinkers. He hired former military planners, engineers, and even psychologists to study what the public desired. He also made one of the most important decisions in Ford history, to design a completely new car from scratch, not a warmed-over pre-war model. That car would become the 1949 Ford Custom. The design began in secret under the supervision of Harold Youngren and engineers like Clyde Payton, using resources that Ford had never before devoted to a single vehicle. The concept was radical, a smooth, slab-sided body that abandoned the old fenders and separate running boards. It would have an integrated look, with a wide stance, low profile, and the kind of sleekness usually seen only in futuristic drawings. For the first time, Ford's body design would be truly modern, a shoebox shape, as enthusiasts would later call it, though at the time it was nothing short of revolutionary. To create the 1949 Ford engineers also had to rethink how cars were built. The company had spent decades using body-on-frame construction, but now they sought something lighter and more rigid. The 1949 Ford featured a brand new chassis with coil-spring front suspension, providing a smoother ride and more precise handling. The rear used leaf springs and a live axle, but the geometry was refined to improve comfort. Under the hood, customers could choose between the reliable 226 cubic inch flathead 6 and the legendary 239 cubic inch flathead V8, one of the last great flatheads before the overhead valve revolution. That V8, producing 100 horsepower, gave the new Ford the power and smoothness that Americans loved. The exterior design was what captured hearts first. Its face was dominated by a simple but bold center bullet in the grille, soon nicknamed the Spinner. It was a design that symbolized speed and motion, even when the car was parked. The body lines were clean, with a long hood, rounded fenders integrated into the sheet metal, and a gentle slope toward the rear. The 1949 Ford seemed to glide even while standing still. Compared to the bulky pre-war design still being sold by some competitors, the new Ford looked like a spacecraft from the future. Inside, the transformation continued. The dashboard was designed with simplicity and symmetry in mind, with round gauges set in front of the driver and chrome accents that reflected light elegantly. The steering wheel was thin, the seats comfortable but firm, and the materials reflected the optimism of the new era. Chrome strips lined the door panels, the roofline allowed for greater visibility, and ventilation was improved. Ford marketed it as the car of tomorrow, and for once, that slogan wasn't just advertising, it was true. When the 1949 Ford debuted to the public on June 10, 1948, it created a sensation. Dealers were overwhelmed. Crowds gathered to see the car that everyone was talking about. The reaction was unanimous: Ford was back. For many Americans, this was the car that represented post-war freedom, the first car they could buy new after years of rationing and military service. Families drove to showrooms with children in tow, eager to trade in their tired pre-war sedans for something that felt fresh and hopeful. The waiting lists grew long, and production ramped up rapidly. Ford sold over 1.1 million cars that year, a staggering success that saved the company financially. The custom trim level, alongside the base and deluxe versions, offered refinement and status for the growing middle class. The Custom could be ordered as a two-door or four-door sedan, a convertible, or even a station wagon. Each carried the same distinctive face but offered different personalities. The two-door was sporty and youthful, the four-door practical and family-oriented, and the convertible glamorous and free-spirited. The wagon, with its real wood panels, became a symbol of American suburban life, perfect for family trips and weekend adventures. What made the Ford Custom even more remarkable was not just its design but its timing. In 1949, the U.S. economy was shifting from wartime production to consumer goods. People were moving to suburbs, highways were expanding, and car culture was being born. Drive-in theaters, roadside diners, and motels were spreading across the country. The Ford Custom became part of that new American landscape, a car that fit everywhere, from city streets to country roads, from young couples to returning veterans starting families. It wasn't just transportation, it was identity. Technically, the car was also a leap forward for Ford in terms of manufacturing. The company retooled its massive River Rouge plant and integrated more automation, reducing assembly time and increasing precision. Ford's advertising emphasized that this was the car built for the years ahead, and it was. Its mechanical reliability, combined with its modern body design, set the pattern for the 1950s. Competitors like Chevrolet and Plymouth rushed to catch up, but Ford had stolen the momentum. One of the secrets to the Custom's success lay in its driving character. While modest by modern standards, its performance was impressive for 1949. The flathead V8 gave it smooth, torquey acceleration, while the chassis provided a level of stability and comfort unmatched in its class. It could cruise comfortably at highway speeds, corner predictably, and absorb rough roads with ease. Testers of the day praised its modern feel, a phrase rarely applied to cars in the immediate post-war years. The steering was light, the brakes reliable, and the overall balance between comfort and control set new expectations for the American family car. The Ford Custom also carried symbolic meaning beyond its mechanical design. It was the first major car fully developed under Henry Ford II's leadership, marking the company's transition from old-world craftsmanship to corporate modernity. It symbolized a generational change, from the stubborn independence of Henry Ford to the analytical, team-driven management of his grandson. It was a sign that Ford could innovate again, could lead again. In that sense, the 1949 Custom was not merely a car, it was Ford's rebirth. Culturally, the car became an icon of the late 1940s and early 1950s. It appeared in countless films, advertisements, and songs. Hot rodders loved it for its simple design and strong frame, making it easy to modify and customize. Many young Americans bought used Customs in the 1950s and turned them into their first hot rods. The car's clean lines lent themselves beautifully to customization. Lowered suspensions, chopped roofs, and colorful paint jobs turned the once family sedan into a symbol of rebellion and individuality. Even today, the 1949 Ford Custom remains a favorite among classic car restorers and hot rod enthusiasts. But at its heart, the 1949 Ford was a people's car, a machine that represented the dreams and optimism of a nation emerging from darkness. It was affordable, dependable, and modern. It carried soldiers home, newlyweds on their honeymoons, and families to their first suburban homes. It became part of the American story, as familiar as the jukebox and the neon sign. Ford had done more than build a car, it had captured the spirit of its time. As the production numbers soared, Ford's confidence returned. The success of the 1949 model year erased the company's financial troubles and restored its competitive position. It also set the stage for the styling wars of the 1950s, where tail fins, chrome, and horsepower would define American automotive design. But while many of those later cars became flamboyant, the 1949 Ford retained a timeless simplicity. Its proportions, balance, and honesty of design ensured that it would never truly go out of style. The engineering behind it continued to evolve in subtle ways. Ford's engineers refined the flathead engine, improving cooling and reliability. The transmission options expanded, including the popular 3-speed manual with optional overdrive, making long-distance travel more efficient. In the years that followed, Ford would introduce automatic transmissions and more powerful engines, but the foundation laid by the 1949 model made those advancements possible. Even internationally, the Ford Custom had an impact. Versions of it were built or inspired copies around the world, from Australia to Europe, serving as taxis, police cars, and government vehicles. Its combination of ruggedness and elegance made it adaptable to different markets. In Britain, where austerity still limited car design, the American Ford sleek lines were the envy of many. The car's influence could even be seen in designs like the early Zephyr and Consul models that emerged in the 1950s. For Ford, the Custom was a rebirth, but also a reminder of its roots. It was built on the same principle that had guided the Model T decades earlier, to give people mobility, freedom, and pride at a fair price. Yet unlike the Model T, the 1949 Ford was not a utilitarian tool, it was an expression of beauty and progress. It showed that Ford could be practical and emotional at once, appealing to both logic and desire. The public response confirmed that Ford had struck the perfect balance. By the end of 1949, Ford's sales had surpassed Chevrolet's for the first time in a decade. The headlines declared, "Ford leads the way again." Newspapers published stories of veterans buying their first new car, young couples decorating their driveways with blue and white Fords, and long lines outside dealerships. For a company that had nearly collapsed during the war, it was a triumphant comeback. In the years following its debut, the Ford Custom 1949 continued to prove itself not just as a design success, but as a cultural landmark that shaped how the world perceived Ford and, indeed, America itself. The car's popularity went far beyond sales numbers, it became a symbol of post-war progress and stability. Every driveway that held a 1949 Ford seemed to hold a promise of a better life after years of sacrifice. It represented movement, not just on the road, but forward through history. By 1950, Ford was building on the platform it had created with the 49 model. The core design remained nearly identical, with small refinements that reflected customer feedback. Chrome trim was slightly rearranged, colors expanded, and the interior received new fabrics. Yet, underneath those small touches, the soul of the car remained unchanged, simple, modern, and elegant. Ford had finally found a formula that combined affordability with dignity. It wasn't a luxury car, but it didn't feel cheap. It had personality, and that made all the difference. Owners of the 1949 to 1951 Ford models often described the car as reliable and easy to maintain. The flathead V8, though nearing the end of its technological life, was a masterpiece of simplicity. Mechanics knew it inside and out, and replacement parts were easy to find. For many young Americans, learning to drive or fix a car meant doing so on a Ford Custom. The engine's distinctive burbling exhaust note became a soundtrack of the American road in the early 1950s. That sound, deep, warm, slightly rough, was the heartbeat of a nation that had rediscovered its confidence. The car's balance between modern styling and mechanical simplicity made it an ideal platform for personalization. The emerging custom car culture, which would later explode into the hot rod movement, found its first muse in the Ford Custom. By the early 1950s, teenagers and young men were lowering the suspension, shaving off chrome, painting flames, and modifying engines. The clean, uncluttered body of the 1949 Ford was perfect for transformation. Customizers like George Barris and Sam Foose used it as a canvas for creativity, turning the once humble sedan into sleek works of art. These modified Fords became icons of rebellion, freedom, and youth culture, the same spirit that would later define rock and roll. The 1949 Ford also played a significant role in film and popular media. It appeared in countless Hollywood productions, often as a background vehicle in suburban or small-town settings. But in some films, it took on starring roles. It became the car of detectives, soldiers returning from war, or couples chasing dreams along Route 66. Its design was neutral enough to fit any role yet distinctive enough to be instantly recognizable. In movies and television, the 1949 Ford became shorthand for America on the move. From a historical perspective, the car also marked the end of one era and the beginning of another. It was the last Ford to use the flathead V8, an engine design that had powered everything from race cars to military trucks for over a decade. By 1954, Ford would introduce its first overhead valve V8, signaling a technological shift. Yet, for all its simplicity, the flathead remained beloved. It had soul, character, and a mechanical rhythm that made every drive feel alive. Collectors today still speak of the flathead's charm as something that modern engines, no matter how powerful, cannot replicate. The Ford Custom's influence reached beyond the United States. In Latin America, many 1949 Fords were imported or assembled locally. In Brazil, Argentina, and Mexico, the car became a symbol of sophistication, often used by professionals and officials. In Canada, it was one of the most popular post-war imports. In Europe, where car production was still recovering, the American Ford represented luxury and abundance. It was wide, smooth, and powerful, everything that European cars of the time were not. To drive a 1949 Ford in post-war Europe was to make a statement of modernity and success. Ford's advertising in the late 1940s and early 1950s perfectly captured this global optimism. The company's slogans promised a new kind of Ford for a new kind of world. The imagery showed families smiling under sunny skies, soldiers returning home to open car doors for their wives, and children gazing through the windows with wonder. It wasn't just a marketing campaign, it was storytelling. The Ford Custom embodied the American dream, packaged in steel, glass, and chrome. On the road, the car offered something that few vehicles of its time could match: comfort and confidence. It wasn't the fastest or the most luxurious, but it felt solid and safe. The suspension absorbed bumps gracefully, the cabin was quiet, and visibility was excellent. Long trips across state lines, which had once been adventures full of mechanical risk, became routine. The 1949 Ford made the idea of the family road trip a real part of American life. As highways grew longer and smoother, the Ford Custom became a trusted companion for millions of miles. There was also an emotional connection between drivers and the car that transcended its mechanics. Many owners kept their 1949 Fords for decades, passing them down through generations. In towns across America, it wasn't uncommon to see a father teaching his son to drive in the same car that had taken him on his honeymoon. The Ford Custom became part of family history, a witness to weddings, graduations, and long summer vacations. Its simplicity made it not just a machine but a member of the household. Technologically, the 1949 Ford was a foundation for future innovation. The new frame design, independent front suspension, and compact body construction set patterns that Ford would refine in later decades. The company's design philosophy began to emphasize proportion, aerodynamics, and human comfort, lessons learned directly from the Custom's success. Even in the 21st century, when automotive engineers study the evolution of modern car design, the 1949 Ford stands as a milestone, a turning point where the industry moved from the old world to the modern era. By the mid-1950s, the car had already entered legend. Classic car clubs began to form, and restoration enthusiasts sought to preserve examples in pristine condition. While many had been customized or scrapped, those that survived became treasures. The Ford Custom's design aged gracefully. Its simplicity allowed it to remain elegant long after chrome-heavy designs of the 1950s fell out of favor. Collectors often describe it as the perfect blend of art and function, and in that sense, it shares a spirit with designs like the Volkswagen Beetle or Citroën DS, machines that transcended their industrial purpose. In modern times, restored 1949 Fords are cherished pieces of history. Whether left in original condition or transformed into show-winning customs, they carry the aura of an era when design and optimism walked hand in hand. Car shows across the United States and Europe still feature the 1949 Ford prominently, often surrounded by admirers of all ages. Younger generations, too, find something timeless in its design. Its curves and proportions feel honest, unpretentious, and human, qualities often lost in today's hypermodern automobiles. The Ford Custom also continues to inspire artists, photographers, and filmmakers. Its silhouette, with the famous spinner, grille and smooth body lines, evokes an emotional connection with the past. It is frequently used in nostalgic art to represent the golden age of Americana, the diners, neon lights, and gas stations of mid-century America. For many, it is not just a car, but a visual symbol of hope, romance, and discovery. Economically, the 1949 Ford success also reshaped the company's internal culture. The profits it generated allowed Ford to invest in research, expand its design studios, and modernize its production methods. It paved the way for the Thunderbird, the Fairlane, and the Mustang, all vehicles that defined later decades. In that sense, the 1949 Custom wasn't merely the rebirth of Ford after the war, it was the foundation of everything Ford would achieve in the following 30 years. Without it, the company might never have regained its competitive spirit. Perhaps one of the most touching aspects of the 1949 Ford story lies in the personal narratives connected to it. Across America, there are still elderly men and women who recall the day they bought their first new Ford. Some speak of waiting months for delivery, of the excitement of peeling off the protective plastic from the seats, of the smell of new leather and the shine of chrome in the sun. Others remember driving across the country in their Fords, sleeping in roadside motels, and watching the world open before them. The car wasn't just transportation, it was a symbol of freedom in motion. Even in racing, the Ford Custom left its mark. Though not designed as a sports car, it participated in early stock car racing, including the beginnings of NASCAR. Its robust frame and powerful V8 made it competitive on dirt tracks and ovals. It was affordable enough for small teams to enter races, giving birth to a generation of racers who learned their craft behind the wheel of a 1949 Ford. It wasn't glamorous, but it was tough, and that toughness became part of Ford's image. In retrospect, what makes the 1949 Ford Custom so remarkable is how it bridged contradictions. It was modern yet familiar, advanced yet simple, affordable yet elegant. It managed to be both the car of the everyman and a design statement admired by artists and engineers alike. Its appeal crossed generations, professions, and social classes. In the industrial history of the 20th century, few products so perfectly captured the essence of their time. Today, when enthusiasts restore a 1949 Ford, they often describe the process as a journey back in time. Each component tells a story: the heavy steel panels, the simple wiring, the straightforward engine. There is something profoundly satisfying about working on a machine that was built to last, built to be understood. Unlike modern cars packed with electronics, the 1949 Ford speaks a language of bolts, gears, and craftsmanship. Restorers often say that when they finish the job and start the engine for the first time, they can feel the heartbeat of another age. At car auctions, a well-preserved or perfectly restored Ford Custom 1949 can fetch impressive prices. Collectors know they are not just buying a car, but a piece of history, the moment when Ford reinvented itself. Museums often feature it as the car that saved the company, displaying it next to the Model T to represent two great rebirths in Ford's history. And when the light reflects on its chrome, and the gentle curve of its fenders glows under the sun, it's easy to see why it remains one of the most beautiful American cars ever built. But beyond all the accolades, statistics, and nostalgia, the real legacy of the Ford Custom 1949 lies in the human stories it created. It was the car that carried veterans home, took young couples to their first dances, and followed the expansion of cities and highways across the continent. It was there when America discovered itself anew, in motion, with music on the radio and a horizon full of possibilities. It is a machine that represents renewal, not just for Ford, but for a whole generation that had seen destruction and was ready to build again. The 1949 Ford Custom was more than a car. It was a symbol of faith in the future, of design born from courage, and of engineering that served humanity's dreams. It was the rebirth of Ford after the war, and the beginning of modern motoring. 75 years later, when one of these cars rolls silently by at a show or down a quiet street, people still stop and watch, because what they see is not just metal and rubber, but the reflection of a time when everything seemed possible again.